I think that we are almost live.
We should be live. I just see the thing that says
Does
that
it
we're
say
live.
that? Okay, I'm just making sure that the sound isn't going to echo for us. Okay. It should not. We are officially live.
Great. Hi, everyone. We're so good at this. Welcome to Rock Stocks. I'm Perizaad. I'm so sorry. I always set you up so badly for that.
I mean, honestly, like right before this, so I had shared a commercial that Adrienne and I made for our All the Rage show, but I couldn't get it from the drive onto my phone. And so I wanted to share it on Instagram, and I'm doing all these things and none of them were working. And so then I just shared it straight to Instagram from the drive. And so it's like cropped weird and yeah. And I'm just like,
It's tough. It's tough being a dancer, being your own. It's tough being your own social media person. That's why companies pay people to do this stuff.
I need people.
Yes, you need people.
People who need people. Okay, that's all I'll do. Thank you for you're like
So we get out of the way. I mean, you can just stay with me, so it's fine. It's totally fine.
Yes.
Anywho, on to today's topic, though. There was a little bit of a dust up on the Facebooks over giving and receiving feedback. There was a dancer who decided to post some do's and don'ts and did so in a way that wasn't really helpful or kosher, right. Really. So we thought, and this is something that Faizeh and I have talked about anyway, is giving and receiving feedback within the belly dance community and how, this community seems to struggle with it. So we thought we would do this week's talk on giving and receiving feedback.
Yeah. Yay.
So, of course, giving and receiving feedback is always going to be like how we say it in the theater. Notes, giving notes. So one of the things, I'll just talk about some of my experiences with it, is both in giving and in receiving. One of the worst notes I ever got was from a classmate who kind of had it out for me anyway because he wanted to bang me and I didn't want to bang him anyway. But he said in a note session that was in front of the entire class, while everybody else is giving, very specific feedback, which is something that we're going to go over, being like, I saw this, I saw that, I heard this, I heard that. He said, it was dull.
That's not helpful.
No, it's not helpful.
It's
and
not helpful.
my teacher even of course I'm like writing down all the notes and everything like that. And I just was like, as I look at him, and the teacher was like, do you want to be more specific? Because that isn't terribly helpful feedback. And I'm like, I mean, he's shooting himself in the foot because at this point, we're also being graded on how we give feedback and you look like an idiot. So
yeah, that said more about him than it did about your.
It is. And that's, yeah. But I mean, that's something to be mindful of too, is, when you give unhelpful or unspecific feedback, it says more about you as the giver than it does about the person that's getting feedback,
Right.
And another experience is with me very badly receiving feedback where I was once again in a kind of a group setting getting notes. And it was the batch of kids from Southern Oregon University from the theater department who were going to be auditioning for the Oregon Shakespeare Festival for their acting trainee program. And I was getting feedback and I was doing something that's a really bad habit where I was being like, well, that's da-da-da-da-da. And I was like explaining the and I was giving excuses and I was explaining why I made those choices or whatever. And then all of a sudden, and it's two professors who were giving me feedback. So one of my teachers gave me feedback. I was explaining away, stop snoring, my cat's here.
Oh, I love him.
And I was explaining away why I had done that. And all of a sudden I realized that my second teacher, Jackie, is literally yelling at me, take the note, until I shut up. And it's actually really important because as a performer who's arguing with the person who's giving me feedback in a group setting, which I've seen so many times in classes where like a student's kind of arguing or be like, well, that's because I'm doing this when a teacher's giving them feedback. It's wasting your time. It's wasting the time of the person evaluating you. And if you're in a group setting, it's wasting the time of every other person there who is also in, because I mean, why are they in class if not to learn from a specific teacher and get feedback?
That coming from the position of as a teacher, that is why you're paying me, is to help you learn. And if I never ever correct you, then I'm just taking your money. I'm just taking your money. And so if I'm correcting something, that's because it needs to be corrected. It doesn't matter if it's that only time you were going to do it because you stepped weird. It doesn't matter if you already saw it. It doesn't matter. Like, don't give me the reason. I mean, I do this too. So, I mean, I do this too when I'm in classes. So I understand the urge to try and excuse it or try to explain why I messed up. Otherwise, I'm perfect. I mean, I understand it, but it's something that I work hard not to do because, as you say, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter why it happened. It just happened, and now it needs to be corrected.
I will say that there are some situations in which it's appropriate. For instance, if you're injured and that's why you can't complete a move correctly, and you need to communicate that with your teacher. Be like, the teacher's like, hey, you seem to be favoring one side. You're like, well, I am. I pulled a muscle. Da 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 da.
Right.
The teacher needs to be aware of that. That's a legitimate thing. Or like, let's say you're in a tech rehearsal and you stumble weirdly. The teacher's like, what's going on? You're like, well, there's a freaking nail out of the stage. That's a safety issue. Or like the lighting's weird towards the end of the stage. Those are safety issues. And those are good times. Yes. At that point, you're providing a specific note to tech. So those are good times to, convey that there is an issue. But if it's just like, I know it was just, so-and-so doesn't know the choreography that distracted me. Like,
right.
No, we're not going to do that.
Right.
So with that in mind, I thought I'd go over some tips that the internet has for giving and receiving feedback. First thing for receiving feedback. First thing, listen to the feedback given.
There it is.
And one of the things that I'll say about this too is that when we're in a class environment or we're in a troop rehearsal, in the moment, it might not make sense. And it might, even sometimes the feedback can be a little embarrassing to get. So one of the things that we always do in theater is we always have a notebook, or we make notes in the script, but you always write your notes down. You always write your feedback down. So that way, because sometimes it is. Sometimes you just came out of a bad rehearsal and you're not in an emotional space to hear it or what have you. So write it down, but like listen, write it down if you have to process later, but just take it in. Just take in the feedback given. Also, if somebody's being really fucking weird about it, like this lady who just like posting pictures with the girls' faces, I'm assuming without their consent, as she called them trashy and everything like that. Maybe that's a moment to be like, I'm going to evaluate later what your motivation is behind this.
Yeah, I didn't see the original post.
I did.
Of course you did. I just saw some of the reactions and the description of it. And one of the things that someone pointed out was that all the don'ts were current people, like something that happened currently, images that were relatively recent, and all of the do's were from like 15 years ago. And I think that's relevant because social norms change. Aside from Like, and something, who was I talking to? I was talking to somebody recently about, I remember what it was. Anyway, how some of the older dancers, or what I like to call the biddies, because I have become one of the biddies in many ways, but this is not something that I do. But they're really critical of some of the less modest costuming that is popular right now. And the person that I was talking to was like, do they not remember that they were literally wearing pasties when they were performing? And I don't know that those specific people were, but it's always been the case that some performers in our specific art form, some people are more comfortable with very modest costumes, and some people are more comfortable with less modest costumes, and some people like me are comfortable with all of them as long as they're pretty. So
and I mean, and that's something else too, is that, you know, this is one of the reasons why it's good to listen, be open, but also like, and be open to what's being said, but also just like, I was just looking over like a proofreading course, and they said that one of the things proofreaders don't do is make edits. You just point out the edits because the client might not agree, or they might have done that specifically for a reason. So even though you are doing what's grammatically correct, they might have this particular style choice, and so you don't make the edits.
Right.
And so that's something, is like, as a performer, you are an artist. You have agency. So even if you've solicited feedback from somebody, and they give you feedback, you might disagree with it, but in that moment, just take the feedback and look back, which is another reason why it's really important when it's possible, and you know, always speak to your instructor about this. Like, if there's a final run that you're going to do, ask if you can record it. Ask your fellow, you know, and if it's one of those things where your fellow classmates aren't going to be comfortable being in the video, like, go stand in the corner, in the back corner, and like set it up so it's just you. So that way, when you look at this feedback, you can see what's being said. Like, that's a really important thing to do as well. But also be aware of your responses, because, as you know, Faizeh and I are talking about, it's very easy to get defensive.
Mm-hmm.
It's very easy to get defensive. Because it is, especially.
Go ahead. Oh, are you frozen?
Did I freeze?
Okay.
You freeze.
I will talk then.
You're back. My back?
Yeah, you were always here. You were always here, but I'm going to talk. So it is super easy to get defensive, and but this is one of the reasons why I try to give feedback in the way that I best receive it, which is direct, but kind. Like, I don't receive feedback well that, I mean, unless it's something they really know me, but even then, like, I don't do well with that looks hideous, don't ever do that again, unless it's, you know, a funny thing. But some people are fine with receiving feedback in that way. I am not. I am best at, your leg does not look right. You know, extend your leg, or fix your face, or whatever. It's always fix your face.
Fix your face.
So I try to give it in the way that I receive it the best. And that's probably true of most people who give it. And the people that give it more harshly probably are more comfortable with receiving it more harshly. So that's another thing, is keeping in mind the personality of the person that's giving the feedback.
Right. Well, and that's another thing that we're going to go over, is how to give feedback, because sometimes people don't realize how they're coming across, and so sometimes they can't take what they dish.
Yeah.
That's not cute. But
Anyway.
Another point is to make sure that you understand the feedback. So, of course, that's going to be asking for clarification. It's one of the reasons why Andalee, when she does Hot Rocks, blocks out a half-hour session for every performer for feedback.
Who wants it? Who wants it?
Who wants it? Who asks for it? Who volunteers for it? Who signs up for it? But she'll block out the half hour, because just giving it in a void doesn't make sense. You know, so it's important to ask for clarification, because if it's not specific enough, or if you're like, what face that I'm doing at this point? That's an important question to ask. So that way you can understand, so you can fix it. But that's not going to be the same as fighting or arguing with the person giving you the direction. Because like we said, that's a waste of time. But if the teacher says you're doing this in this moment and you say, can you show me? That's not wasting anybody's time. That could in fact clear things up for other people in class or in the troop. So that's fine. So make sure, seek to understand always, but don't fight. Don't argue.
Well, yeah. And at the end of the day, and this might be one of the other internet points, is you need to be teachable. So,
yes.
So what that is born out of is humility. So it doesn't mean you're not allowed to recognize the level that you're at, or your ability. Like, I'm really good at my Mayas, so if someone comes up and tells me you're Maya, blah, 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 I'm going to take it with a bit of whatever, whereas this other move, like say my arabesques are, and somebody says, oh, your arabesque needs work in this way, because I'm more humble. But my point is, be humble so that you can get better.
Right. Absolutely.
This is art. We're always going to have room for improvement.
Well, and the thing is too, is I would say seek out feedback, like obviously from your instructor or your troop director, if they're, if you're performing their choreography, you need to learn it from them. But like for general notes, seek out feedback from people you respect. Like if you have a TA, like if you have kind of a TA in your class and you're like, nah, I just don't really get along with her, she's not necessarily the person to ask. But like I did this recently where I have, Laura Lael, Adrienne, Faizeh, and I are very close. And those are all three women who, obviously, my God, have you seen them dance? I respect the hell out of them. So when I was gearing up for something, I sent them some recent videos of me improvising, and two videos of me improvising and one choreography piece. And I was like, can you provide me feedback? And they all provided feedback in an email, which was great because I didn't have to write it down. I had it in written form, so I could go back and I could reread it, and I could go look at the videos and read it and look at it again. And it was great. It was very specific, which is something that we're going to talk about in a minute. And it was something that I could go back and I could look at over and over. So, verbal in the moment, if you have nothing else, like if you're doing a workshop with, Aziza Montreal, and like we're going to be for Hot Rocks, you can't start an email thread with her, but if you're like, I was really struggling with this move, can I do it for you really quick and see what we can do? That might be appropriate if she has time and she's willing to. That's a great way to do that. But I honestly, right now, since we have the time, I'm all for finding your friends that are willing to, finding the people that you respect who are willing to give you feedback, sending them videos of some of your performances or rehearsal videos, and getting email feedback, because it's great, because it's written down. You can revisit it over and over and over again as many times as is necessary. And also one of the last notes that they say is to follow up. So, of course, obviously, thank the person who's giving you the feedback if they're doing so politely and not just putting you on blast on Facebook.
I love how you have your tea.
I didn't do this on purpose. I just did it because it's like rainy and cold outside, but I'm really glad I have tea for this. Oh, let me spill some. No, I'm kidding. Anyway. And then, so yeah, those are the main points for receiving, which I think if everybody comes to class or rehearsal with a mindset to receive feedback, I just realized that my hideous exercise bike is out. Whatever, it's fine.
I have my house is in disarray because we just had to have our pipes redone, and so let's see if I can point. I can't this.
Pin the finger on the wall patch.
That's our house is in absolute disarray, and it's been really frustrating because I haven't been able to practice for a week and a half. And that is my reason for not practicing. It really is, because there have been several times when I really needed to. And my desire has been there, and my living room is already small, and the couch is in the dead center of the living room. And I can't, I'm doing a a 6-week course with Amanda Rose right now, and it's
Ooh.
online. And I haven't been able to do it because I have no space. And even if I went to my studio, there's no internet at that studio, so it does me no good. So it's really frustrating.
Maybe do golden era and incorporate the couch like a divan.
Maybe.
Maybe.
Anyway, so yes, back to the topic.
Moving on to giving feedback.
Sorry.
Oy, God, I'm not wearing cover up. I was really lazy with my makeup today, so like you can see every color my face turns. God. Moving on to giving feedback. Some really good points are concentrate on the behavior, not the person. So in this case, saying like, you're still really beginnery. It's not going to be helpful.
No.
Saying like you're really beginnery, or like you haven't, or it's like, you're kind of lazy, or you're just kind of dull. That's a great one. You're dull. You're not really sparkly on stage. Those aren't going to be helpful sources of feedback. But saying that somebody needs to be more lifted in their chest during their arabesques because it's going to improve their center of balance. It's going to look better. They're just going to be able to perform better. That's specific. That's something that they can handle. If you're really having to come to a troupe member who's just lazy and not practicing, I was actually in a psychology course that even said that it's great to like compliment to separate the person from the behavior by like being like, you are such a smart and talented dancer. You need to practice more. Like separate the person from the behavior. That's a great way to do it, is to like, and that's actually another point that they make that Andali specifically mentioned in her interview with us was this says balance the content, but she calls it the feedback sandwich.
Right.
With something they did well, what they need to improve on, and then ending it with something that they did well. So that way it's a nice sandwich that's easier to swallow.
I have found that reminding people why they want the feedback. So for example, and this is usually people that I'm really struggling with trying to get them to reach their potential. Like I see the potential, and so like or acknowledge that there are other things that are getting in the way, like their couch in the middle of their living room. Like I know that work has been really hard, and you're really tired, but I also know that this is important. It's important to you to do really well. So I need you to find 5 minutes a day to go over this choreography. This works better with a troupe than a class, but so that you're prepared when you show up, because we all need that. Like acknowledge that they're human, and acknowledge that, but also remind them that this is important. So,
well, and it also works well in a class setting, because we do recital type things. Like we do class performances, and it's like, hey, it's really important for you to show your mom and dad what they, that you do really well, and like maybe they didn't agree when you first started taking this class, but you really love it, and so this is how you show them. So you need to show them your best.
Yeah. And one thing that when we were still dancing at the Antelope Valley Fair, and I worked really, really hard on our big performances with all of my students. And I did that because my students wanted to do those performances. And so when students would act like they were doing me a favor, then I was like, I'm not getting paid for this. This is for you. So if this doesn't happen, you're not letting me down. You're letting everybody else down because you didn't practice, or because you don't, you're not letting me down. I'm not getting paid for this.
Yep.
So,
and actually that is a really, that is a real thing, because when we were performing at the Poppy Festival and at the AV Fair, there was seating that was usually taken up by friends and family, but there was a lot of passersby who would just be like, oh, what's this? And if you didn't work on your piece and your piece was crap, the passersby would leave and the other dancers wouldn't have the opportunity to have that performer because,
Yeah, that audience
so
member.
you were letting down. And I mean, like, the passersby, there's one time that Faizeh and I particularly enjoyed where a random guy, we were doing Chic Shack Shock and a random guy came and threw $4 at us.
It may have been more, but most of it blew away.
Also, I'm pretty sure from the video, he goes, "Wah!" It's like $4. And we're like, cool, whatever. That's the first time that's happened at one of these performances, but great.
Yeah.
But we put on a really good show. So people were sticking around. The energy got brought up and it was great. And so people were sticking around for the other dancers. Maybe we even drew in some people who hadn't been watching before and were walking by. So anyway, that's just doing a good job. This is getting off topic a little bit, but
what?
So
we never get off topic.
What? Never, not us. Especially not when we're checking ourselves out in the Zoom camera and like adjusting our hair and stuff. Yes, I am doing that every time, and yes, I know I'm being that obnoxious. Hair break. So be specific as well. Like I said, like don't just be like your overall performance, your posture was bad. Be like, like I said, in the arabesque, one of the best, and this was a general note that Kamala Almanzar gave to the class that was taking the workshop, but she said, when you do your arabesques, inhale, and it's the best note I've ever gotten because it forces my chest up. It really does align my center of gravity. And much better than me being like, I need to lift my chest for this and find my center. No, just breathing has helped my arabesques every time. So being specific, like I said, separating the behavior from the person, being realistic. Like, if somebody is a beginner, you can't expect them to dance like Samia Gamal by the end of 3 months.
Right.
But, telling them like your snake arms, you could probably get up to snuff in time for the performance. Like that's a realistic goal.
One of the things, this is going to be a little bit of a complaint here about other students in the class. Other students in the class see that I am not correcting something from, student A.
Oh.
And yes. Student B is like, why aren't, and they want me to correct their posture. They want me to correct their snake arms or whatever. And I know that student A is struggling to just have, loose knees or, or get their oblique strong enough so they could do a hip drop or whatever. I'm not going to do the litany of things they need to work on because they're a beginner. Or even people are like that themselves. They'll be like, I want to, this, and this, or teach me this. And it's like, I can't. You have to master this before I can teach you this. I still have students that they think that they've gotten it or they've learned it. So because they've learned it, they think they're ready to go on to the next thing. And it's like, you may have learned it, but you need to master this before the next thing. You're not going to teach somebody a Turkish drop when their core and their quads are not strong and their flexibility isn't there.
Yeah.
And that you can see that,
Like, I'm so glad you can spot those spins, but you are not prepared for you are not prepared.
Yeah. It's true. And so, yeah, when you're in class, be concerned about yourself. Just stop telling me how to do my job. And if you have a problem with it, you can address it with me by ourselves later.
And, and it's funny because I was talking about if your class has a TA. What I mean by if your class has a TA is that if the teacher has appointed a student that has been dancing with them for a long time to, take over leading the warm up so she can go correct people or X, Y, and Z, that's going to be a teacher appointed student, not a self-proclaimed lieutenant, which I have been guilty of being before. And I can think of some other people, but like, it happens. You get so excited. You finally feel like you found your stride and you're like, I'm going to help everybody. Shut up. If the teacher wanted your help, she would ask for it. And, there have been times that I've been asked to, continue leading a warm up while a teacher's like gone and corrected somebody. It's a great feeling. And you know what happens? I hand the class back over once she's done. So
That's a good
it's,
thing to do.
it is. I can tell you, as somebody who's aware of that behavior in myself and has had to correct that in myself, I don't do it now. I was just younger Avery. But
it's because we're not meeting in person.
When I see it, what?
It's because we're not meeting in person for class.
Whatever.
I'm just teasing you.
I know, but when I see it now in other people, it drives me bonkers. So just a side note. Don't be a self-appointed lieutenant. Something that I think is really important that they mention is owning the feedback. When you're offering feedback, make sure that you say I, not they, not one wants to do blah blah blah. No, it's you. It's you. You're offering this feedback. Own your opinion, because it is in fact, it's not like, unless it's something like you fell out of that turn. That's pretty objective that they fell out of that turn. But that's something
probably
that's really
aware
helpful.
of that too.
Yeah. But and it's being like, but also being like, you don't have to fall out of a turn every time. There's a way to land that turn without doing so. But that's something that I really appreciate about when Adrienne, I'm mentioning you again, Adrienne, live with it. When I ask Adrienne for feedback, she and I understand that we have very different styles, because she is very Egyptian based or very Egyptian focused. And because I came up in American cabaret, my style tends to be more Turkish. And so she'll own, like, you'll need to talk to somebody else because that could be a Turkish influence. However, from what I'm seeing, I would say that you need to do X, Y, Z. And she owns it. And I respect the hell out of her for it. And it's true. It's like, if it's your opinion that you don't necessarily like that I mean, like, sometimes there are things it's like, yeah, that costume really shouldn't be worn. Like, you probably shouldn't be in some, like, there are times that that's appropriate where a costume is inappropriate for a particular dance. Like, doing, like, wearing a Falahi dress during a Mahagranat piece is probably probably not. But cane, using cane during a debki, that actually is an opinion, because there is actually a context in which a cane could be used during a debki, because cane is also in Lebanese dance. Might not be your particular thing, but there is actually so own the feedback. So be specific, own the feedback, separate the behavior from the person. And then this one I think is incredibly important, is offer continuing support. Because, one of the things that you've mentioned, Faizeh, is that Roxanne Shelaby, who we love, will come up after a performance sometimes and say, are you open to some feedback? Which is great. But if she were to be like, are you open to some feedback? You've been dancing for 25 years and your posture's still horrifying. And then just walk away from you. Like, awful. That's horrifying. And she's not offering to help you. Like, that's not okay. So that's another thing too, is like, with the owning the feedback, that it's your opinion. Also, like, that's something that Adrienne and Laura and Faizeh always do, is when they offer me feedback, they're always saying, like, let me know if you need help. I'm here for you. And that makes me, as the recipient, way more open to the feedback, because I can say, like, okay, so you told me to, like, one of the things that Adrienne told me, which is true, is that I dance to the rhythm about 80% of the time and the melody about 20% of the time. And I have a tendency to do 8 counts of something to the right and then do 8 counts of the same thing to the left, because I'm still really uncomfortable with improvising. So that's kind of how I'm like, okay, what am I going to do next?
I haven't forgotten about the Spotify list that I promised you. I have not forgotten about that.
Oh, yay. See, continued support and feedback. But and that's feedback that's really valuable and to me. And she's also been like, if you, and that's something, so Faizeh and I were talking because I'm uncomfortable with improvisation. Faizeh said, let me see if I can come up with a couple songs that are like a Spotify playlist that is just a bunch of long talk scenes that you don't have really a rhythm to rely upon. That's continued support. And do that for your friends, obviously. Like, you don't have to do that for every single person you ever come in contact with, but I mean, maybe that's an important piece of information. Don't offer feedback to people that you're not willing to offer continued support to.
Well, and I like that you brought up how Roxanne says, are you open to some feedback? Because people, and I don't know if this is just how some people are, or if the internet has made people feel like they just are free to give their opinion wherever they want. I don't know. But timing is often everything, and who you are in somebody's life is often relevant. You know, there are certain people I really don't care what they think, and I don't want to hear what they have to say unless they want to tell me how fabulous I am and how I've converted them to, you know, I don't care. And then there are other people that I absolutely respect their opinion, but I may not be ready to hear it the second I step off the stage. The second I step off the stage, I need to hear, oh my gosh, good for you, you know,
Yeah.
because I'm still like, you know, already like tearing everything that I did down and going, I can't remember, I forgot to do this thing that I practiced so hard, you know, and I need reassurance the second I walk off the stage.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean that the next day I'm, you know, that I'm not going to be open to it.
That is.
So it's important to not just go running around giving feedback just because you see something. We all can pick apart everybody else.
Oh yeah.
All of us. And that doesn't, but it's not necessarily relevant. It's not necessarily wanted. You're not necessarily the right person to give that. So
well, and that's another point that, you know, that gets brought up is that, you know, your feedback should be timely. So, you know, it's being prompt is important because that way it's still fresh in the person's mind. But as they said, you know, timing is also everything.
mm-hmm.
So letting somebody know that they were off by 2 counts for the entire piece immediately after they got off the stage, especially if they thought they did well and everybody cheered for them, so they're like excited. I mean, that's going to kill a mood, and that's not going to be.
Yeah.
That's
and it's not even necessarily something that needs to be said if they're never going to do that piece again.
Well,
it needs to.
I would argue that it is. I would argue that it is because it's going to carry forth into the rest of their work. So it's something that they can be mindful of.
This is what I was about to say: is it needs to be something that's relevant for the future.
Right. Right.
So pointing out to somebody, you know, you came in early and then all the rest of us just stood there and shimmied for 2 minutes straight because you came in early. You know, that there's, and that's the only time you're going to perform it. You know, if somebody nailed it every single time during the rehearsal and they screwed up in the actual performance, there's no point in just pouring salt or pouring lemon juice on that paper cut because they know.
They know. Yeah, I mean that's important. And I'm sorry, y'all. I've been watching a lot of Drag Race, and something just occurred to me. You need to know the difference between offering feedback and reading somebody. Like if you're offering like continued support for somebody, that's feedback. If you're saying, and I'm here for follow-up, I'm here for clarification, et cetera, that's feedback. If you're just like, your shimmy sucks, and you walk away,
that's not feedback.
That's not feedback. That's a read. That's a read.
Yeah, feedback is helpful. Critique is helpful. Criticism is not.
Yeah. Yeah. So
anyway, we've been at this for 40 minutes.
Hey. So yeah, to sum up, be open to receiving feedback. You know, be mindful of the feedback that you give. And you know, in the spirit of the original post who did all the what not to do's, don't just call out dancers while you're calling them trashy and use their pictures with their faces.
Yeah, that
not blurred out because that actually might be actionable because it's damaging to their professional reputation. And it's funny because every post that I saw calling out that dancer didn't use her name.
Interesting.
It was people in the comments being like, it was so and so. Here's the link to her Facebook profile. And I'm like, all right. But yeah, so don't do that. But try to be mindful and, be specific and not just, don't give feedback for your own self-aggrandizement.
Yeah.
That's not feedback. That's bullshit.
Yeah, that's for your own ego to make yourself feel superior. And that's going to shoot you in the foot in the long run, because then people are going to not want to work with you in the future. If your goal is to make yourself feel superior, I don't want to work with somebody who just wants to feel superior.
Nope. I mean, we love feeling smug. We understand the desire, but we're not going to throw people under buses, except for
no. At the end of the day, we all need to support each other.
Yeah.
So
yeah. And if you really feel like somebody's behavior is detrimental to the greater community, maybe have that conversation with them. See if they're willing to have that conversation with you. That's one of the things, on this, one of the things that we talked about was professionalism. We talked about wearing caftans, or at least a cover up to and from your gig. So that way, because part of it is that's your performance. That's, the revealing, the revelation, the revealing of your costume is part of the performance. But also it's a safety measure for yourself and for your fellow dancers and attendees. So, but that's a conversation we're willing to have with people, because there are people who don't agree. We're willing to have that conversation with people. We're willing to, say our opinion and hear their side of it. And then, either agree to disagree or be converted either way. Fine, whatever. But we're not going to it's a conversation that needs to be had, not putting somebody on blast. That's not feedback.
No, nope, it's not.
So with that.
So next week we have Christine, who right? Isn't that who's next week?
Yes, we have Christine Yeaman from Jakarta. We're very, very excited. One of the people who organized and performed in Rock's Curve,
which was so good.
Yes.
So it was such a good show. I finally got to watch it last night, and I loved it so much. So
we've actually had most of the performers on from that, because we've had Katie Sahar, we've had Chudney Rocks, we've had Roxanne Shalaby. We're going to have Christine Yeaman, and we are on the books with Yalia.
Yep.
So we got them all.
Yep.
Like this channel, go look up the previous interviews and then stick around for the other ones if you really like Rock's Curve. We're just going to plug that for us. Blah.
There it goes.
It's my channel. I can plug myself.
Yeah. I mean, isn't the channel so that we can promote ourselves? I mean, obviously promote other people, but we're part of people.
A little bit about us.
So, all right.
Anyway, this has been this week's Rocks Talks on feedback. If you agreed with or disagreed with anything we said, please let us know in the comments. Otherwise, give us a like. Be sure to subscribe. I'm Perizaad.
I'm Faizeh.
And we will see you next week.
Masalama.